Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello folks, welcome to another episode of the 1% Better podcast, another live Tuesday night episode. They're not always going to be on a Tuesday night, the live ones, but they seem to have for the last few weeks, and I'm grateful for that. And in this one, I've been connected with a lady who has made a movie 10 years ago, but has a career before that and a career after that. So we're going to get into her story. The movie is called Vanishing of the Bees. And I would love to introduce you to Maryam Henein. Maryam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Ready to go.
Ready to go. You've also been dubbed the Erin Brockovich of the bee world. Is that something you like, a tagline as that, or is something, what's the story behind that?
I like the tagline because I think that these days we need taglines to wave attention in from people. People certainly know Erin Brockovich. Julia Roberts hasn't played me, and I've interviewed Erin Brockovich. I did a lengthy piece on the status of water in the United States of America. So yeah, I appreciate it. I think that it's surprising people still don't realize that bees are disappearing and that we're still dealing with colony collapse disorder a decade later.
So we'll definitely get into the story because it is a fascinating one. I watched the movie in my research for this, and I always like to go into lots of detail especially in documentary type movies. So we'll talk a bit about that. Just to get a bit more background on you, Maryam, talk to me a bit about your early career. You know, you've been in journalism, you're an activist. Maybe just give me a run through of, you know, your growing up. Was that what you foresaw for yourself in the future? Just to learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. I am Canadian from Montreal, Canada. I'm Egyptian, Greek mixture. And looking back, I think I grew quite a sheltered life in Montreal, in Canada. And I came out here after graduating, Los Angeles, here being Los Angeles, after graduating journalism school. And for a long time, I freelanced. My beats were Hollywood and spirituality and sexuality. And at age 29, I was hit by a Ford Explorer and dragged 50 feet, quite a near-death experience.
Oh.
And that kind of set me on a different trajectory. I never, I've never set out to produce a documentary. I'm a journalist, and today I'm a functional medicine coach. After almost dying, kind of put it out there in the universe that I wanted to do something that was bigger than me, to be in service. I've almost died actually a couple of times. I was very lucky, am very lucky that I can walk, and I also attribute that to my tenacity and persistence and resourcefulness, because as a Canadian, I didn't have health insurance because I grew up with health insurance, and it really opened my eyes to Western medicine. So despite having a 13-inch metal titanium rod in my femur, nobody said, hey, you need physiotherapy, because I wasn't insured. I had to have subsequent surgeries, and I fought to remove the metal rod. And I say fought because you can ask people with hardware. They live with it for the rest of their lives. I chose to remove it because I felt that it altered my constitution, and it toggled inside of me. And that set me down a rabbit hole because I experienced post-traumatic stress. My body kind of erupted, and I used everything that happened to me, whether it was insomnia or adrenal fatigue, to educate myself and empower myself and turn to alternative health. So after eventually the bees flew into my life, and collaborated with George Langworthy. Ironically, after making the film at an environmental film festival, I was exposed to fumigants. They were where I was staying, fumigating between two buildings. And so it's just ironic that I too got exposed to pesticides, and a few months later just lost all my strength. I'm, even though I had had a rod in my leg, I'm active and physical, and couldn't even go up a flight of stairs. I was in so much pain and thought it was maybe my thyroid, and was diagnosed with lupus and fibromyalgia. And the doctors, when I asked later, could this be chemical body burden? That's the synergy of all these, whatever, heavy metals, whatever I was exposed to. It was a blank stare, complete, like here's some Cymbalta and some prednisone. There's no cure. We're just going to label you, and your body's attacking itself. And at that time had already launched Honey Colony, and you could say the bees stuck, and Honey Colony is an online magazine and marketplace. And the aim is to empower people to be their own best health advocate and to put honesty back into the food supply. So that's kind of my trajectory. I would say that today in 2018, things are crazy, especially in the United States. We're living in a topsy-turvy world where things are just inside out and don't make sense. And it's really an opportunity to have an awakening and to question things and to use critical thinking. And I believe and know that food and clean food is a component to that, because we're now facing epidemic of brain drain, brain issues and gut issues, and the gut and the brain are connected. It's the same axis. And so we're making leaps and bounds as far as functional medicine, as at looking at the fact that 1 in every 2 people today suffers from a chronic illness. So what's going on? For people who don't think that the environment is affecting, they're wrong. It's not only about food. Certainly food is important, but our environment and the stress levels that we're coming up against.
It's funny you mention I am actually a type 1 diabetic, and probably in your world of functional medicine you might have some remedies or treatments around that. We could talk about that. And I'm only diagnosed about 5 years ago, so it wasn't something I had from a young age. Type 1 generally, they say, is hereditary or genetic or something, but there's been a massive upsurge in how many type 1s have been diagnosed, certainly from a latter point of their life rather than from a juvenile perspective. So yeah, I'm one of those too. I'm that 50% that you mentioned there. So anything you can do to help me, I'd be open for that.
Well, it has to do a lot with insulin resistance that you build up from years and years of eating carbs and basically not being able to produce insulin. So what we see is a ketogenic diet can work wonders for a lot of people. And it does constitute kind of a deep dive if I was like sitting down to consult with you. But I am very much of the belief that we can reverse things with food and epigenetics. And that's, after years and years of kind of turning against myself, and also realizing that 95% of we're led by our subconscious beliefs, and they can be running us. So if you tell a human being your body is attacking itself, which is what is essentially happening with autoimmunity issues, is, well, wow, if I can't trust my own body, who can I trust? So that is absolutely, the body is doing what it can it's having this inflammatory response. It's doing whatever it can. And so after studying metabolomics, we have 5,000 metabolites in our body. And it's all this beautiful dance, right? You need enzyme, coenzymes, everything to work together. So when you have disease, 2 things are happening if you distill it like this. One is you're not getting the micronutrients that you need. For whatever reason, you're eating a crap diet, you have malabsorption, there's something that's preventing you from absorbing the nutrients, or you're not getting them. Or the body is exposed to chemicals or pollutants at a greater rate than your body can heal. So the body wants to heal, it needs a little help. So if someone was coming to me with type 1 diabetes, I forget right at this moment which is the one that's they say is reversible. Is it type 1?
No, type 1 is not reversible. Type 2 is the one that is more diet, and I'm putting that in quotes because some people say it's not, but it is completely reversible. Type 2, type 1 isn't.
So you're taking insulin shots?
Yeah, shoot up 4 times a day at least with insulin. Yeah.
Yeah, I would adjust the diet and see what that does. High fats, no carbs, no sugars, and then I would look. I'm a big fan of taking tests to be able to see specifics, and people don't usually do their tests. So I don't know how old you are, but it's like, oh, what are my hormone levels? The food we eat can turn into hormones. Light turns into hormones. So there's so many different variables, and it's not just food. The more and more I take a deep dive, having studied last year blue zones and longevity. Blue zones are areas in the world. There are 5 where people live in their 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s. And to look to those people, we see that it extends beyond longevity and good health extends beyond just food, but definitely I don't know how it is where you live and in Ireland as far as the food supply being adulterated, but I live part of Greece, and people have these romantic notions of the food quality there, or are surprised when I tell them that I don't have access to organic food unless I was growing it myself. The truth is, what Europe is doing in the different countries is the same as what's happening in the United States, where they're subsidizing and promoting these crops that are not really nutritious, that are monocultures, that are mostly grains, genetically modified, and subsidizing that. And then therefore, even in Greece, the people in Greece have secret gardens and eat food that they grow, but what they serve, even in a blue zone, is not necessarily local. And that's sad.
Is Greece in the blue zones?
Ikaria, which is an island 25 miles north of Turkey, is a blue zone. And what I found is that people are more interested, because it's a lot of tourism, right? They've made it an industry, and you have to think in Greece having an economic situation that they live on tourism, and they make their money 3 months out of 12 and so they don't want anything to kind of threaten the industry. And I say that because the truth is that the characteristics that preserve a blue zone are being threatened, but it seems like they're more interested in the kind of the narrative, like this fantasy that they're selling people. Like Americans will go to Ikaria and think that they're not going to die. That's how silly it is.
Okay. Well, look, I brought up type 1. Certainly, anyone listening,
yes.
I don't want to drag it down to. We can have a separate talk about that. Okay. But I definitely want to just go back to obviously talk about the movie for folks that haven't seen it. I do remember this coming out maybe 9-10 years ago, or a lot of stories around it. And when I watched the movie, it was interesting near the end, and I'm not going to give away too much, but so much TV footage. Even there was a music video, there was a rap song or something, kind of mimicking all the bees kind of disappearing, how it became mainstream in the media at the time. How did you get into the whole process of deciding to put this documentary together, and then maybe talk into the early stages of how it all started to come together?
Well, it was 2006, and George and I wanted to collaborate, and like I said, I had put it out there that I wanted to do something, that I wanted to make a documentary and it to be meaningful. And I had just finished producing a segment on the Exxon Valdez oil spill for Robert Greenwald and the Sierra Club. Anyway, George that the bees were disappearing around the world, and that he thought it would make a good documentary. He's a fan of mysteries, and it was certainly a mystery at the time. And you have all these like swarms of bees all over the world, just mass exodus, and what on earth could be causing it? I spent afternoon doing research, and it really resonated with me that the honeybees are a sister society. So in a healthy hive of let's say 50,000, 90% are female and do all the work. And I also, with colony collapse disorder, one of the traits is that the bees will abandon the brood, the babies, and the queen. And I saw that as being unnatural and a direct parallel to what we're doing to Mother Earth now. At 2006 is the heels of Inconvenient Truth and a real kind of awakening that we are harming the planet. So it was a different time than now, and we can see in a decade how much we've raised our consciousness about, there's all these movements. There's, you can go and study food politics. You couldn't do that when I was growing up, have food studies, right? So that's how, and then that really resonated with me. And I tell people, literally a few days later, I started having bee visitations, and they haven't stopped. And it's been, we spent 5 years making Vanishing of the Bees. And I think I was really galvanized. I like to think visionary capabilities where I could see something that can be manifested. And I really saw this was a global issue and that it was going to be big. And so that's why I devoted so much of my time and sacrificed 5 years of my life. And the bees stuck. So because of everything that they represent, they really have been teachers and guides to me. And I feel really blessed. Like, one of the things that lends to long life and happiness is a sense of purpose, what the Japanese called ikigai, sorry.
Yeah.
And I have a sense of purpose after, almost dying and kind of floating aimlessly like a dandelion in the wind. So I'm grateful for the bees for opening my eyes up. And I tell people that all roads can lead to bee, because they teach us so much about industriousness, community, collaboration, working for the greater good. They give us our food, and they work together.
No, definitely. And I think from going through the movie, taking out some key points, that obviously resonated. And I think the way you put it together, as you were kind of looking back in history, making reference to bees and the important role that they had played, kind of certainly brought that out. There's a deeper message in there. I think, the queen bee, the female equality, that was certainly something that you put front and center in this, right?
Yes, we could have been kind of more esoteric and lost people, and there is a movie like that out there, I think, Queen of the Sun, but we really wanted to steep it in science. And there were so many different facets of the honeybee in our culture and history. I mean, think we took 300 hours and edited into 87 minutes. So we wanted to steep it in science, but we did touch upon the sacred feminine and kind of the history and the legacy, if you will, of the honeybee. And it's definitely important, because we're living in an age where there's a lot of the male energy, and this is not being sexist, because we have male and female energy within all of us, but it's the principle of kind of this destructive as opposed to this nurturing energy. And the bees can invite us to do things in a different way, because a lot of times when you are a female in the working world, then you just act more male. It's a woman, Clinton, that's a female? No, it's not. Sure. So yes, we touched upon the female, the sacred feminine.
No, it was well touched upon there. Just maybe even in the details, I found it kind of touching, obviously, as well, from those families that were fifth generation beekeepers losing their livelihood within a matter of months. I think there was one guy, Rick Smith, I think it was his name, from when it broke out to 6 months later, I think they were effectively nearly gone out of business. That must have been difficult even to be shooting and producing all this around these people, because there was a lot of emotion and pain there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be in a field like in the scene of the kind of the graveyard, and it's quite eerie. You have all these hives upon hives upon hives just empty, and you have people who are losing their family business, and it is a really David versus Goliath story. However, with that said, things change, and unfortunately we have awakenings through tragedy, and the truth is that these commercial beekeepers are part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of an unsustainable system. So it's things have to change, and in the movie, the bee shaman Simon Buxton says, which is probably one of the favorite best lines in the movie for me, is instead of having a future where you have one person with 60,000 hives, you have 60,000 people each with one hive.
Mm-hmm.
And that certainly has stayed with me as a hobby beekeeper who is just happy to have the bees. It's not being a steward. It's not for me. It's not about messing with them. It's not about, oh, look at all the honey. Like the people, I wrote a very spicy article about the flow hive, and it's, I'm taken apart by first of all, I'm a journalist. I'm all about inviting critical thinking and debate and having conversation, which is more and more needed in this society today, where we're so touchy and people unfriend each other because they disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So that article was taking apart the Flow Hive, which I'm sure you've heard about the Flow Hive. It was the most successful at the time campaign on Indiegogo, and it was what I said, turning can just turn the tap and then get honey. So all of a sudden you care about the bees now because you can get honey from them. To me, it's not about the honey per se. Not to say I don't eat honey, but I think it's sacred and medicinal. And the bees, we should just be stewards.
Yeah.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
didn't
lose you. No, it's okay. I want to make sure I didn't lose you.
No, I'm here. So I guess, obviously I want encourage people to watch the movie if they haven't already. But I suppose towards the end of the movie, the research that was done was all really trying to identify a smoking gun. I think Ellen Page, who narrated it, which was probably a great coup for the movie to help raise some more awareness around it, talked about the smoking gun and trying to identify the cause. There was a few stand out, and I think as well, just maybe you can clarify, but when they identified one or two potential causes, they said a year later in France, or France was an example of it happening 10 years previously, I think, and it had somewhat bounced back. Not saying that this was a solution, but they were just saying that, this is just an example of what could happen in the future, or how bad things could get. Can you talk a little bit about... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I don't think it's like me spoiler alert if I say what's at the root cause of colony collapse disorder.
Sure,
also, why would someone want to see this? It's came out in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we started filming in 2007.
Right.
So it's been a decade, and what has happened in a decade? Well, the honeybees are still disappearing, and systemic pesticides, which are the root cause of colony collapse, are very much in use, and the most popular pesticides in the world, not to be confused with Monsanto's Roundup. And now, whatever, they're the same company, Bayer and Monsanto. They've joined forces. So this is still relevant because bees are still dying, and my message is that we are the bees slowly being poisoned. Now I say slowly because these are sublethal doses, and what's happening in our environment is that we're being subjected to all these environmental toxins, and they compound and they synergize and they accumulate, and it's very insidious that way. So these systemic pesticides have been now likened to DDT, except they're 5 to 10,000 times more dangerous than DDT.
Explain just DDT there for a second for anyone that might know what that is.
DDT is a chemical that was used back in the I think late 60s, 70s.
Okay.
And I don't know the full I can look it up.
Chemical properties. Don't just even the what impact it had.
It's a chemical, and it was lauded and used and sprayed all over the place. And Rachel Carson, who was editor-in-chief of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, that was also integral in creating the Environmental Protection Agency in the early 70s, became a person who spoke up against DDT and was integral in banning this poison. So if we think that these systemics, plus they stay in the soil, and their metabolites are more dangerous than the parent compounds as they break down over up to 18 years. They're killing not only bees, but birds and bats and hummingbirds, butterflies, the aquatic life. They're messing up the coral reef. This is serious. It's in our brains. It's in our blood. I mean, all these chemicals. A baby is born today with 100 something chemicals coursing through the umbilical cord. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
What are we doing? It's crazy.
Sure.
So that's why I think someone should watch the film to educate themselves that a honeybee pollinates 1 in every 3 bites of the food that we eat. And while there are other creatures that are dying for selfish purposes, the honeybee is the most useful for us, because it's responsible for giving us our vegetables and fruits and nourishing us with real food. And monocultures are all over the place, and they're full of chemicals.
And from making the movie, I get a sense of what you did to put that together and put it out there. It must have been very satisfying, but I also get a sense that it probably made you even more frustrated with the way things are developing. Would that be fair to say? It was kind of mixed emotions from it?
Yeah, I definitely think that I've lost some of my sweetness over the years of waking up to the reality of how we grow our food and the smoke and mirrors, because in reality, all of these mainstream products, whether they're beauty products for our skin or processed food, it's all crap with ingredients that we can't pronounce, let alone digest or assimilate. And I come at it not only as a Canadian, looking at the American system, although, modern agriculture is really what's at fault here at the root cause of how we grow our food. But looking at it as a Canadian who also had experience as a patient, and how they treated me from Western medicine, and then looking at, studying the food supply for more than a decade now, and then also being exposed myself to pesticides and hacking my condition to reverse my lupus. I mean, I tell people in the mainstream and they don't believe me. Okay, you can be invested in being sick forever, but I'm not. I've woken up, and humans are incredible, and we're being people are waking up to the fact that Western medicine doesn't have our back, that it's just about profits. And that is threatening to the system. And I have witnessed that firsthand, what it's like to be a pioneer on the front lines. I'm talking about now selling a plant medicine, CBD, and what I've had to go through to fight for people's right to have access to this medicine. So whether it's this medicine or the truth of how amazing we are, and to empower people to be their own best health advocate, and to not just listen blindly because someone's wearing a lab coat. Who cares? I mean, I've known more information than the doctor that's seen me in many cases, and that's not to sound arrogant. I'm educated, and no one knows your body more than you. You just have to get in touch. People are out of touch. They're kind of immune, and I think a great part, because of having a near-death experience and also being exposed to pesticides, I am a very sensitive creature. I am an environmental indicator. I have multiple chemical sensitivity. I can walk in a room and go, oh, there's mold here. Oh, there's a gas leak. Oh, there's some poisons. I smell things that the average human can't. And it's not because I'm a freak. It's because I'm an environmental indicator, and people should be grateful because I'm allergic. Yeah, that's how I feel.
But
So yes, I've become sensitive, and I've become cynical, and I've, once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep.
No, absolutely. And I think, as you said, there's more and more, hopefully more and more people becoming awake and becoming more active about what is going on. Just on the point that you mentioned of being that indicator and that you have that extra sensitivity, is that something you always had, or how has that developed? You've developed that yourself, have you?
No. I had a near-death experience. I literally died and came back. And then after that one, I broke my tailbone, and they say the tailbone is associated with olfactory senses. So when I woke up in the hospital, I joked that I developed supernasal powers. I could break down the, this person the orderly smells like nicotine and Tide and bleach. And that was one thing that kind of tapered over the years, but I have definitely a sense of smell. And then literally getting exposed to chemicals. It's called multiple chemical sensitivity. I'm not the only one. Interestingly, I think it was in the 90s, there was a movie called Safe, played by I forget her name, Julianne Moore. Okay. And it's all about someone that has chemical sensitivity. Of course, she's perceived as a freakazoid, and has to go into this hippie commune where the air is fresh, because she goes into the hair salon and she has a reaction. She goes into the dry cleaners. So it's not something I've developed. I mean, I believe that we're all intuitive, and we all can be, tap into our body, for me to be like, oh, I've started ovulating, to be really in touch with your body. That takes work. It's a muscle like anything else, but this sensitivity is not something I don't on a conscious level chose, because I have a handful of other very sensitive friends, very sensitive, and we see it as a blessing and a curse, and it sure is. We want to just be normal, whatever the hell that means anymore.
Yeah, normal doesn't have a normal meaning anymore. It's just funny because, not funny, but I actually interviewed a doctor, a neuroscientist, Eben Alexander, not so long ago, and I haven't released that podcast yet, but he has wrote a book called, I'm looking at it at the moment, where is it now? It's about his NDE, and he was... He died effectively for 7 days. He had E. coli, and he then came back and talked at length. He wrote a couple of books, a Proof of Heaven. Sorry, I wanted to remember the name because I just edited the show at the weekend. But I'm totally on board with what you're saying around NDEs and how that has been a massive change for him. He's seen things that, as a neuroscientist, somebody that had believed in science, he was a Harvard professor as well, that after his ND came out and completely went down a different path and talks about, certainly about consciousness and awakening, and he's a completely different person. So yeah, no, I'm definitely on board with where you're coming from, and believe you, and obviously know that there's so much to us that we're probably closed off from because of how we're conditioned from the get-go, so
yes, absolutely.
I absolutely agree. You touched on CBT or CBD oil, right? So since the movie, since the publicity, since all of that stuff that had happened, what has life been like for you? And I know you've developed and grown and taken on new challenges. Maybe talk to me about that, and certainly touch on the story around CBD and anything you'd like to share around your journey since.
Sure, thank you. After making the film and decided to create in 2011, 2012 Honey Colony, and have been basically, I built it along with a team into $1 million startup, $1 million company. And for the entrepreneurs out there, they know how difficult it is to run a business, and to, when it's a tech business, also you want to be, you see yourself as a disruptor. I see myself as a disruptor, as a thought leader, as also a biohacker, someone who's hacked my own condition. Without having that term hacker, I used to call myself a guinea pig. But being in that world of looking for products that, everything on Honey Colony are products that I use, and so therefore I vet them, and people come to us because they're like, oh, this chick made a, she made a documentary, so she studied the food supply. She's also been sick. Wow, she's reversed her lupus, fibro. How did she do that? So we handpicked in the first couple of years and created our own products. And that included CBD, in 2016. Now today, everyone and their mother, I joke, is making CBD, but we were and have been always kind of on the cutting edge. We talk a lot about the antibiotic resistance epidemic. Well, now that's kind of mainstream, but we started talking about it 4 years ago and touting the properties of silver as a natural antibiotic. Again, having experienced miracles in our own lives. Like for me, I grew up taking antibiotics, and I had urinary tract infections for on and off for a decade, more than a decade. That means every time I took antibiotics that decimated my gut. Anyway, so since taking silver, I've not been on antibiotics for 7 years. I've not had a UTI. That's a miracle for me. So we introduced CBD oil, which is a cannabinoid found in the cannabis plant. With ours is from industrialized hemp, meaning it has less than 0.3 THC, but still guarantees the entourage effect. So the entourage effect is because ideally you want to have all the terpenes and cannabinoids in the plant. So we have cannabinoids in our own body. We have CB1 and CB2 receptors, and they oversee homeostasis. So balance, they regulate things like mood and metabolism. So we see that the reason why CBD is so quote unquote miraculous, if it's done properly, is that it is working in a sense like an adaptogen, where it's going into the body and giving you what you need. So we see a lot of crappy CBD products out there, and so we've melding kind of science and love together to create this artisanal product. And then since creating that in 2017, I refer to it as the year of playing whack-a-mole. So if you can imagine being a business owner, and then you get shut down by PayPal, and then you get shut down by Stripe, and then you get shut down by Square, and then you get shut down by QuickBooks. And every time, that means you literally cannot make transactions. So you're threatened, your livelihood is threatened. So this happened over and over again, and we had lost, about $100,000. And to put things in perspective, from 2015 to 2016, we went from $200,000 in sales to $1 million, which is a great thing for a startup who's been working their ass off to build. So in 2017, with all the shutdowns and not able to prove what is going on, because you can buy CBD on Amazon, but it's a crappy isolate and not a full spectrum formula, was kind of strange. And I just need to say, hey, FYI, there is a movement to create a legalized, FDA-approved fake CBD, synthetic. And they are estimating that this will bring them in billions and billions of dollars. The company, the main one that just brought their Epidiolex to market, is called GW. Well, they are partnered with Bayer. So just have to say that, hey, just FYI, that movie that I made that talks about Bayer? Well, that company, it just so happens I share bud and bees with Bayer. And I, along with others, have been shut down. So we are being threatened or right to plant medicine. So this impacts every one of us if you want to have access to plants that are grown in nature, that no one should have jurisdiction. And you have to wonder why. Oh, okay. So I can get this fake CBD and spend $60,000 and have all these like lovely side effects, or I can just pay $100 a bottle for an organic brand that has integrity and that will cost me a lot less and it's natural.
So,
I know it's hard to choose.
but so my question on like how were they able to shut you guys down? And was it what's the legality or the reasoning behind shutting an organic version of this down versus the synthetic?
Well, it has nothing to do with organic. It has to do with misinformation. It has to do with control. It has to do with a system, and it's again insidious where you can't point out because the PayPal will say, I don't want to. They do business with the banks. The banks do business with big pharma. They do not want to have association with, we'll see it as unregulated, as FDA. Whatever comes from the FDA is safe, which is bullshit. Excuse me.
Sure.
Is not true at all, and we can look up all the deaths associated with prescription drugs. And I've written a lengthy piece called "The Faux Faith of Science" that looks at the corruption in science in today. So they shut you down, and I mean, to be me personally, shut down for life. I don't sell. I've never sold CBD on my PayPal handle. Why is my interview that I give being taken off of Twitter? Why is my 2-year-old video a very benign video that a cannabis lawyer looked at? I mean, the hell that we've endured, I've endured, the sacrifices to get people this medicine. Imagine it's just been hellish. We also then found a processor out of China that robbed us $20,000. Then we had another processor that's a big shot in the CBD world also rob us, meaning when I say rob us, they shut you down and then they never give you your money. They just keep it because they can. And then you look up, let me look up the CEO of this company. He has a criminal record and he's on the ripoff report. There's slime in behind the scenes of this very, very lucrative. So it's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy to shoot someone at the ankles and disable their way when all I want to do is offer quality and empower people and help them, because there's a lot of, like I said, 1 in every 2 people is sick. People, I see them, they come to buy a product and they're trying to get medical information on a live chat, which is, who would do that? Sure. No one worth their salt would give them real solid information on a live chat. But that's how desperate people are for relief. And Western medicine doesn't have the answers. And people realize that more and more.
So that's just happened in the last number of months, is it?
No, it happened in the last year.
Right.
So by July of last year, we had lost about $100,000 from the shutdowns. Then we got robbed $20,000, which was really the nail in the coffin. And then, just to say quickly, we needed capital. And I empowered a CFO and a COO that found capital from cash advance places, which I joke, are kind of loan sharks. So imagine having a business where they're taking $1,400 5 days a week directly from your account, which was what was happening. And when you lose all that money, you can't buy stock. Your customers are upset. And I just basically got rid of my employees because they were doing, I think, an unsatisfactory job. And for the past 7 months, I've put the company back on track with I'm very proud of myself, what I've done, because most people would be like, I'm going to file bankruptcy, and managed to get my processors back up, my accounts, because what happened was my team closed the bank account while I was out of the country. I was studying, like I said, I was doing research on blue zones in Greece last year, and the bank didn't check with me. So when you close a bank account and you owe bad people money, then they put liens on all your accounts and they freeze your accounts. So Yeah, that's been all in the last year, and now the company is back on track. And I used to have 12 employees, and now I'm almost a one-woman show, running $1 million company with maybe two other people.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's been a roller coaster. How have you, for yourself, even kept a positive outlook? How have you managed to? Where does the resilience come from?
I prayed a lot with strangers, with customers. I meditate. I do the Marianne Williamson, who's a spiritual teacher and author, Course in Miracles. I took CBD oil. I but just from the perspective of you're a human being and you're an entrepreneur and you literally don't have access to make money. I mean, just to think about what does that do to a human being, and to lose so much money and to work with crooks. So it's also galvanized me, because in this process, I became customer service, and I've spoken to hundreds of customers. And, I knew I created a beautiful formula. It's liposomal, it's organic, it's sourced with, it's CO2 extracted. But to hear people like, this person has bladder cancer and found relief. This person has PTSD. This person has fibromyalgia. So to hear how the formula and the CBD oil, our formula, is helping people has been very inspiring, that that you're helping people. And that's the whole mission of the site. And the bees are very much part of that, because they've been part of my awakening. And, the film, the tagline, one of the taglines we wrote for the film is you like to eat? Then you should you watch this film. For anyone who likes to eat.
That's pretty much, hopefully, everybody that would want to watch it, because obviously there's some good stuff to take out of it. But just picking up on all you've been through, and some of the dealings, like I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, and how they've picked themselves back up, and lessons they've learned along the way. What were the key lessons you've taken away, even out of the last 12 months, that kind
to
of
trust your gut? I'm a highly intuitive person, and I was telling my business partner that the people working for us were not doing a proper job, and instead I turned against myself due to certain psychologies. And I don't have an MBA in business, and what I've managed to pay $100,000 in debt in 7 months by working my ass off like a worker bee. So to believe in yourself and your gut, and I don't subscribe. I'm not part of the matrix. I'm awake, and I try to think outside of the box. I don't really care what the norm does anymore. The norm doesn't. I'm not the norm. I'm proud to say that. So to just persist, and to persist and to believe in what you're doing regardless. I mean, with that said, there are times when it's good to give up. I'm not a giver-upper. I've never been. I was born with the cord around my neck, so I have been a survivor from a young age, and I'm very persistent and driven young lady.
You are. I can definitely take a lot of those values straight from the conversation. So that's to be commended for sure. I wanted to just question again. Sometimes these come up for me. How do you deal with fear, or does fear come into your life? And again, I'm just fascinated, because it doesn't sound like you're fearful. You face things head on.
I definitely had. Sorry to interrupt you, Rob, but I woke up with anxiety. Literally felt like I was drowning, gasping for air, because again, I would say it's like the first chakra, your survival. So I definitely had a lot of fear of ending up on the streets. I felt alone because I had a team, and then I felt like they deserted when it got rough. But I think I have faith, and I do believe that I'm a blessed person, that I'm here for a reason. And again, not saying it egotistically, but having almost died, I think 3-4 times like a cat, and I'm
5 to go.
I'm still here, and I do have. When I say pray, I was raised Christian, but I'm not at all religious. But I prayed with my JC loving dad. I prayed with a rabbi. I had a lot of customers that I would pray with, and I believe in prayer, and I really recommend Course in Miracles, which, you need to not live a victim narrative. So it's not what happens to you, but what you do with what happens to you. And I'm a real believer of that everything can be an opportunity if we. It's all about perception. Excuse me. And so that's helped me a lot to not. And I think we all have that victim mentality, or at least I did growing up, and having to kind of delete a lot of these self-limiting beliefs. I think in Los Angeles, having a sense of community, and I do feel very isolated in Los Angeles, and I do crave that sense of community, but being around like-minded people, especially like I said in the beginning of your program, that we're living in a topsy-turvy world, and I don't know how it is in Ireland and compared to America, but I think it's becoming more and more obvious to people, or people are having an awakening to the smoke and mirrors, that it's all BS. And we have to really go inside to find that strength, and taking it one day at a time. I really did feel a lot of times that I was, okay, got to put my armor on today. I'm going to be fighting with loan sharks and lawyers and get bullied. And also I am a strong woman, but there's no question now that I was treated differently as a woman by some of these slimy characters. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I think a day at a time, for sure.
It does, and
gratitude, big.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed Rosanna Arquette. She obviously goes through Danny as well. Just yesterday, early, and some of the stuff coming up for her is gratitude as well. And I think the world is waking up to an awful lot of BS, as you said, and hopefully everybody continues to move in the right direction and look for that positivity and I don't know, happiness is, I suppose, at the core of it all, is what we all want to look for. So Maryam, I think that's been really interesting for me. I hope folks that are listening have enjoyed it as well. It's a story, definitely, that not as just about the movie, but about your career, where you're going to next. I hope you're on a positive upward trajectory.
Yes.
Just last couple of quick questions I always would like to wrap up with. Is there a saying or a phrase or a cliche that you kind of say that you get something from, that you believe in, that gives you that bit of strength? Is there anything that comes up for you there?
I have a lot of quotes, and I have a vision board, but nothing to me. What I had mentioned about it's not what happens to you, but what you do with what happens to you. And for that question, I'll just say that I believe in nonviolent communication and taking responsibility for our words. Our words have energy, and to speak in the I and not to be blaming. That's what comes up for me.
Okay, very good. And then just again leaving with a book reference or a book recommendation. Is there anything you've read in the last year or that stands out that you took something from that gave you some strength?
Yeah, so many books.
Any one jump out?
I usually read like 5 books at a time.
I know, it's hard.
How about I'm listening to Jordan. Well, I say on Jordan Peterson's book.
Yeah, is that the 12 rules? 12 rules of life? Is it? That the name of it?
Yeah, 12. Well, of chaos, isn't it?
Of chaos, maybe. Yeah, life and chaos, probably similar type things. It's most of it.
Yeah, I don't. What's it called? 12 Rules of Life: An Antidote to Chaos. Okay. So I'm listening to Jordan's book, and there was another book by Vishaan, Unfuckable. Can I swear on this show? I don't know.
You can. It's past the watershed, and it's okay.
The Code of the Extraordinary Mind.
Who wrote that?
And Vishan Lakiani, and he has something called a company called Mind Valley. And
oh yes, I know Mind Valley. Yeah.
I've been wanting to go and speak at one of their festivals. I love speaking about the bees and the knowledge that I have and how it pertains to us. So anyway, that book was memorable, and I listened to lots of podcasts on health and nutrition, and I listened to Joe Rogan's podcast, and I'm always trying to download information into my head, mostly about functional medicine. As a functional medicine coach, I mean, we're learning so much about the gut right now, and anyway,
it's interesting.
Yes.
You mentioned the gut. One of the episodes I did earlier this season is with a professor here in Cork. It's psychobiotics, and it's the how the gut is your second brain.
Yes.
And you should check it out. It's a very interesting story, and his book Psychobiotic Revolution, I think, is the name of it.
I know that book. I haven't read it, but I will check it out.
I will send you a link onto that.
We are more bacteria than human cells, and so we really have to wonder who is it that's in control, and the fact that we make, the serotonin in our gut, and it's responsible for mood, and I think that I tell people that the zombies are here, the future is now, and what we eat is the amounts of sugar that people eat dumbs them down, ages them. And definitely something's going on, almost like a tipping point where critical thinking is not at an all-time high. Not at all. There are people who are literally getting dumber by the day, and I'm not saying that to be offensive. You can look at the studies of these heavy metals and these environmental toxins that literally rob us of IQ points. So it's in the water, it's in the food, and it's I believe, a means to dumb people down and to control them.
Definitely an interesting line to leave it on, Maryam. But it's been interesting for me. As I said, every time I talk to somebody, I'm learning something new, and hopefully sharing it helps others pick up on something. And awakening is always something that I'm trying to adopt myself and wake up to a lot of the things that are going around us. So I hope that message came across well tonight, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk me through your career, your journey so far, and hopefully lots more good stuff to come in the near future for you.
Thank you, Rob. And may I tell people how to find me?
Absolutely, please do that.
Please, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Maryam Henein, Maryam as in Mary, Henein as in Nancy, and you can buzz on over to honeycolony.com or simply transformative.com, which is where we keep our CBD oil. And thank you, Rob, for this opportunity to talk about the bees and food and health.
No, thank you, and I will put those links into the notes of the show, as I said, which is out now, effectively. It'll just take a short while for me to put some of those notes together, and hopefully I'll put it out on Twitter. Feel free to retweet it there. If people get in touch with you, certainly get back in touch. Let me know how that goes. And have a great rest of the day, and keep on fighting on, and best of luck in future endeavours.
Thank you too, Rob. Have a beautiful night.
Night time. Yeah, bye. Very good. Take care, Maryam. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right. So that's an episode with Maryam Henein complete. And that just leaves me with a couple of bits to do before I wrap up. Clicking in the background, so hopefully you don't mind the mouse clicking. Okay, so before I wrap up, as I said last week, if you're listening to these live shows, they're certainly work in progress. That was an interesting one for sure. I try to put my intros from the 1% Better show that I release at the weekends or Fridays into this show now, so that there's less less of a long intro for folks. So this week I recorded an episode with Rosanna Arquette just yesterday. It's going to come out on the 864 podcast. If you hear some beeping sound in the background, I'm going to turn that down. And that was a very interesting conversation with Rosanna Arquette. There was some similarities that I just had there with Maryam, but Rosanna Arquette, who's Hollywood 30-40 year career, and it felt it was an interesting conversation, as I said. So that'll come out on Friday on the 864 podcast. This is the 1% Better podcast, so you'll need to subscribe to the 864 on iTunes or Google Podcasts or wherever you listen, or just come onto the Rob of the Green website and it'll be there when it comes out. Then we talk about values, we talk about positivity, we talk about Donald Trump, Harvey Weinstein, and books. A lot of books were recommended by Rosanna. So Friday. Okay, what else? This episode will go up shortly. I talked about that, and in the last week I got a lot of good feedback from folks about the 1% Better podcast. Some of the guests that they've listened into, they took something from, so that's always really, really good. The 864 is growing. We have about, number 8 or 9 coming out, and I have another number recorded. Kind of doing a lot of recording at the moment and pushing them out. Still trying to find the right balance of when to release and when not to release, but as long as people are getting something from it, I'll just keep doing it, and that'll be hopefully a positive experience for you. I'm getting fun out of it. If you are, I'll just make a few final call outs. It would be great if you go onto the iTunes or Google Play or Google Podcasts. I'm not sure if you can even leave a rating, but take a second to give a rating if you enjoyed this episode, or if you didn't, give it 1 star or no stars. If you like it, give it 5, or any of them, give that rating. It always helps because it pushes the episode or the show up into higher echelons of the charts. And if you've listened to me a few times, I don't believe in the way the charts work. I don't know how they work actually, but last week we were as high as 7 in the education charts, which was good. New people get to click in as a result because they see Tony Robbins and they see TED Talks and they see us somewhere around there, and they say, what's this 1% Better show? And then they'll hopefully enjoy it. So I can't emphasize enough how much I would be grateful if you did that. Gratitude is something that keeps coming up in all these shows. Practice gratitude. So I would be grateful, and practice gratitude with somebody you know. Tell them you're grateful. That's always a nice thing to do. Doesn't cost anything. Just potentially do it and feel better yourself. Okay, next week, I'm not sure yet. Next week I think I have a live show on Monday, not Tuesday, and I have a really good 1% Better show next Friday, which will be with David G. I think I teased that this week, but because the Rosanna Arquette one was something I really wanted to get out quite quickly, I decided to put it out this Friday. All in the name of betterness is really what I'm trying to kind of go with. So I won't say much more than that. I think I'm going to play the outro music there now. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully the sound was clear. I'm going to check that out as soon as I say good night, good day, goodbye. Another one done. 1% Better podcast. Have a great rest of the week, and let me know if you enjoyed it. Drop me a note, drop me an email, follow on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to the 864, because the Rosanna Arquette episode coming out on Friday is well worth checking out. Okay, good luck, take care, thanks for listening.